morning. Please pray with me. Our Father, we come together this day to hear your word. Guide our worship this hour. You know us. You know our thoughts, the joy and sadness, the good and the bad. You accept us as we are, as we strive to be the people that you would have us be. We ask that you would keep our footsteps firm on solid ground, helping us to be consistent and faithful. Give us the endurance to stay the course, not swerving to the right or left, or being too easily distracted by other things that would seek to call us away from the close walk with you. Open our eyes, our ears, our minds, and our hearts to you, and help us reach out to others. We thank you for your love that is steady and does not falter, unlike our own. You are faithful and true, even when we are not. You are a great and awesome God. We thank you for your goodness and mercy and the love that you have for us. Be with those that are not here today. You know their wants and needs. Keep them safe. We now pray the prayer that was taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Now, as is our tradition, please stand as you are able and pass the peace.
Good morning. We're glad that you have found your way here to worship with us at Ridge Road Baptist Church this morning. Thanks for setting your clocks right and for making it here at the appropriate 11 o'clock. It's good to have you here. We have a couple of guests with us this morning and are thrilled especially to welcome them to worship. They'll both be leading us in worship. First of all, sitting up in the choir is Jacqueline Brown. Jacqueline was with us a couple of months ago and will be leading us musically, both with the choir and on her own later in worship. She comes from the American Caroling Company. And Jacqueline, we appreciate your contributions to our service this morning. We're also grateful to have with us Dr. Tony Cartledge. Dr. Cartledge is an Old Testament professor at Campbell Divinity School. He led the first of our 4 Lenten Bible study sessions this morning. So if you were able to make it to that, then you got a taste of his teaching style. He will be with us again Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week. We'll be starting at 5 o'clock with a meal, and then Dr. Cartledge will run with things after that. We'll be in the chapel for all of those meetings. So if you didn't get a chance, or even if you did, to be with us this morning, we really hope that you will be able to join us for those sessions. He is covering a great expanse of the Old Testament in 4 relatively brief sessions. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. I didn't go to Campbell, and I've never actually heard Tony in the classroom, The places where I have heard him are usually gatherings of pastors, and what I can tell you about him is that he is an excellent storyteller. You will hear him weave a tale in a way that includes lots of imagery and detail in ways that are particularly gripping. We look forward to hearing your message this morning and to continuing to have you with us throughout the week. One announcement that I will draw your attention to is that our Easter lilies, the order forms for that are due next Sunday. So if you wish to contribute a lily in honor or in memory of someone, the order form is on the yellow form that's in your bulletin. You're going to need that later in the service because there's a hymn on the other side. So don't rush up here and put it in the offering plate. But after the service is over, after we've sung that hymn, if you need to fill something out for a lily, you can do that and then put it in the offering plate up here at the altar at the end of our service. Continue our worship with the reading, and I invite Miriam to come and lead us in that at this time.
Good morning. Our morning litany is from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. It is written, I believed, therefore I have spoken. We know that the one who raised Jesus will also raise us with Jesus. The grace that spreads will bring thanksgiving to overflow the glory of God. Inwardly, we are being renewed day by day. We fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Our momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory, and we do not lose heart.
My name is Jacqueline Brown, and I'm so glad that Dr. Davis invited me to worship with you all again today. I have already had one person ask me about the title listed in the bulletin this morning. It is Phos Hilaron, which I'm sure I'm saying incorrectly. It is from the Koine Greek, and it means, "O gracious light." The text is from the oldest written hymn that we're aware of besides the Psalms from the Bible. We have found pieces of this writing as early as the 3rd century. And although obviously the chords and the melody that I'm going to use are much newer than that, I just love that lyrics from over 1,000 years ago can still inspire us to worship today. Oh, gracious light, so pure and bright, dispel the darkness of our hearts, that by your brightness we may know the light, incarnate Word. Grant that the light, deep and kindled in our hearts, may shine forth and give us divine light. Day spring of life, to light from light, pour into every broken heart. Peace and virtue, binded by the light, O Jesus Christ. Holy and blessed, we sing thy praises in our hearts. God of heaven, giver of all life.
gracious one. Oh, gracious light, so pure and bright, dispel the darkness of our hearts, that by your brightness we may know the light.
The scriptures come from Isaiah 40, verses 21 through 31. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in, who brings princes to naught and makes the rulers of the earth as nothing. Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown, scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth, when he blows upon them and they wither, and the tempest carries them off like stubble. To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him? Say the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see. Who created these? He who brings out their host by number, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hid from the Lord, and my right is discarded by my God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is an everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. These are the scriptures of God for the people of Christ.
May I pray with you? Dear God, you have been walking with us for a long time. In some moments, we have sensed your thunderous steps alongside us, shaking the ground and jarring us from complacency. In others, we have felt you gliding gently beside us, smoothing out the rough patches in our landscape. We remember you sprinting gleefully, joyously as we celebrated. We remember you plodding along, giving us space to think. We even remember times when you stopped altogether and waited for us to figure something out, to discharge our frustration and anger, to grieve. You are walking with us still. We cannot have been easy to walk with. We are aware of only our own pace and goals. We tend to dominate the perambulatory conversation, to speak far more than we listen, to insist that our concerns remain in the spotlight. We fail to own up to our own missteps. When we end up in the wrong place, we blame someone else. At times, it must feel like you are walking in circles with us. Forgive us for our lack of attention, our lack of humility, our lack of grace. Forgive us for being hard to walk with. Despite our shortcomings, you remain here. Despite our stubborn blindness, you do manage to show and convince us where to go occasionally. You point us in the right direction, nudge us onto the right path, encourage us to take those first tentative steps, sustain us to continue when our energy flags. Thank you for walking alongside us. Thank you for refusing to give up on us. Thank you for motivating us, for comforting us, for propelling us forward throughout the world you created for us. Walk with us today in this place. Make us conscientious about each step, that one footfall after the other might be compelled by your truth and your love instead of the result of our own selfish hubris. Direct our paths, that we might walk closer to the goodness of your kingdom and that we might walk closer with you. We ask this today not only for ourselves, but also for our whole world. When we think about the journey you have taken with us, we cannot help but remember the places where it began, and we know that these are parts of the world particularly desperate for your peace, your kindness, your generosity, your love. Instill a calm in those who stride furiously or self-righteously. Set forth a passion for those who drag along with no spirit in their souls. Help us to walk together, moving forward as one rather than marching into battle against one another. Spread this goodness across all of your creation, from the gates of Eden throughout the world, and likewise prick our hearts with your benevolence, reminding us that we ask nothing of the world that we would not ask of ourselves, and we ask nothing for ourselves that we would not ask for the whole world. Continue to walk alongside us, to provoke us to listen more than we speak, to soak us in your encouragement and consolation, to become stronger and faster as we walk alongside you, because we walk alongside you. And walk through our hearts, your spirit stirring deep within our souls, the conscience to improve consistently, not for our benefit, but for yours, for others. From the beginning of time until now, from now until the end, make our steps as yours. Amen. I invite you to turn in your hymnals to number 136 and to stand if you are able as we sing together our hymn of praise, "Oh, for a Thousand Tongues to Sing."
My It's a delight for me to be with you today. I think I wasn't particularly aware until I looked at the bulletin that our Bible study together has the rubric Lenten study. I was just focused on Old Testament, and maybe that's part of the idea. Sometimes people give up something during Lent or think of it as kind of a dark or mournful period, and a lot of people just don't like the Old Testament, and so maybe it fits somehow. Any study that involves the Old Testament would certainly be incomplete without looking at the prophets, and no prophet is better known than Isaiah, all three of them. If that sounded a little surprising to you, I will explain later. But first, I wonder if anybody might have been scratching your head over the sermon title, if you noticed it. 3 on the tree. 3 birds, 3 apples, 3 squirrels. I see enough gray hair to know that some of you know what I mean when I refer to 3 on the tree. Others might pick it up if I said it's sort of like 4 on the floor. Some of you are still wondering, what is he talking about? There was a time years ago in the 60s, most cars and trucks still had a straight drive transmission. You had to change gears. Automatics were becoming more popular. Some of them had punch buttons. That was kind of interesting. But whether straight or automatic, in most cars, the shift lever was on the steering column, where your wiper control is now. And typically, there were just 3 forward gears. First, second, third. That was 3 gears. They were on the steering column. That was 3 on the tree. If you had a Mustang, it might have 4 on the floor. But typical cars had 3 on the tree. You don't see a lot of those anymore. I haven't seen one in a long time. My first car was a 62 Chevrolet Bel Air with 105,000 miles on it in a day when cars rarely made it that far. It was our old family car, but my father still made me pay him $300 for it. My sophomore year in college, so I could drive back and forth rather than catching a ride with Alan Danner. The car had a manual transmission, of course, and it had that shift lever on the column. I had 3 on the tree. It still doesn't explain why I'd attach something like that to a text from Isaiah, but hold on, and you'll find out. Now, I suggested that there might be 3 Isaiahs, not just one, and so let me give a little explanation to that, and we'll build in a little of our Old Testament study into the sermon. The first Isaiah lived in the latter half of the 8th century BCE, that somewhere around 750 to 700 in that neighborhood. And during that time, the people of Israel were divided into 2 kingdoms. There was a northern kingdom that was known as Israel. The capital was at Samaria. Generally, about 10 of the traditional tribes made up the northern kingdom. It was larger by far, in terms of population, than the southern kingdom, which had its capital at Jerusalem, and it was known as Judah, and it consisted mainly of the tribe of Judah. And Benjamin was kind of back and forth between the north and the south. And they had been this way for some time. The kingdom had been divided for some time, and life had been up and down. But during most of the 7th century, especially, or the 8th century rather, during the first half of it, things were pretty good. The superpowers, Egypt and Babylon, were dealing with some of their own kind of difficulties. They weren't really causing any trouble. And the people of Israel and Judah were both relatively prosperous, and they were feeling pretty safe and pretty sassy. But Isaiah came on the scene to let them know they'd gotten a little too sassy. They were too busy worshiping other gods, many of them, and they were too busy. The wealthy people were taking advantage of the poor. Social injustice was rampant in a lot of ways, and he mainly wanted to let them know if they didn't straighten up, God was going to have something to do about it. The first Isaiah preached a lot of doom and gloom, but it had little effect. There was no widespread revival, and trouble did come. Toward the end of Isaiah's preaching career, somewhere around 722, 721 BCE, an Assyrian king named Shalmaneser, I love that name, Shalmaneser, it's a good password, by the way, led his troops to conquer the northern kingdom, which at that time was known as Israel. His armies destroyed the capital city of Samaria. They scattered many of its people to other lands that Assyria had conquered, because that's the way the Assyrian kings like to do it. We'll conquer you, we'll make you go live somewhere else, and we'll make other people we have conquered come live in your territory, and that way you won't be organized and you'll be easier for us to control. This led to the idea that there are 10 lost tribes, by the way, if you've ever heard that. There really weren't 10 lost tribes. There were a lot of displaced people, and a lot of them just went to the south when it was evident that the Assyrians were going to conquer Israel. Many of them fled to the south. We have archaeological evidence that shows that the population of Jerusalem, for example, increased exponentially during this time. So a lot of people from other tribes who had been living in the northern kingdom now came and lived in the southern kingdom. Well, that was it for the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom hung on. But about 20 years later, another Assyrian king named Sennacherib decided he wanted to conquer the southern kingdom as well, and he made a lot of progress toward that. He conquered 46 cities, or he claimed to have conquered 46 cities, and to have shut up Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, like a bird in a cage. He put Jerusalem under siege, but for some reason didn't stick around to complete the siege. The Bible has a story saying God sent a plague and his army all died, and so he went back home. Exactly what happened, we don't know. The Assyrian records don't tell us. But even though he did not conquer Jerusalem, he still forced King Hezekiah to begin paying tribute. So the southern kingdom continued to exist, but it was largely sort of a vassal state, having to pay tribute to the Assyrians. Well, in time, the Babylonians conquered the Assyrians, and about 100 years later, aren't you loving all this history? About 100 years later, a Babylonian king named Nebuchadnezzar, his name was really Nabuchodonosor, but the Bible calls him Nebuchadnezzar when it doesn't call him Nebuchadrezzar. He led his army to invade Judah and conquered the southern kingdom around 597 BCE, but he didn't destroy Jerusalem. Why burn down a perfectly good city? He replaced its king with someone that he appointed, changed his name to Zedekiah, put him in charge, took King Jehoiakim into exile, took a lot of the other people into exile, primarily the royalty, the wealthy people, the skilled craftsmen, the people that they could make some good use of, took them into exile. About 10 years later, King Zedekiah decided, I'm tired of paying tribute, and he thought he would gang up with the Egyptians and try to establish their freedom from the Babylonians, and that only led Nebuchadnezzar to come back, and he did burn down the city this time, destroyed the temple, burned the city of Jerusalem, carried a lot more people into exile, and that happened in waves over a period of years. And so by this point, there is no more nation of Israel. There are still some Hebrews in the land because they left the poorest of the people to tend the farms. what's the use of conquering somebody if you can't squeeze something out of them? So you've got to have some people left behind to do the farming so that you can collect some kind of tribute from the people. So there are still Hebrews in the land, and there are Hebrews in exile, but the land was lost. There was no more nation of Israel in the land. The records we have from there come from the exile. We don't have records from the people of the north who were scattered in the other places, but the people who went into exile had a lot to say. Prophets made it very clear. The reason you're in exile is you didn't listen to the first Isaiah, or to Amos, or to Micah. You didn't listen to them, you didn't straighten up, and so God allowed you to be conquered and allowed you to be taken into exile. After 40 years or so, most of the people were dead, who had been responsible for that, along with all of their ancestors, and the ones who remained in exile began to wonder if God had given up on them altogether. Maybe they wondered if they should give up on God. It's a hard life living in exile. It's hard for us to imagine. The people who could understand that best today are the Palestinians. People who were forced from their homes in 1948, 1.5 million of them, and forced to live in refugee camps where many of them still live. Did you know more than half the population in Gaza are refugees living in refugee camps? Not allowed to go back to their home, to have their land. It was a hard life being in exile. It was frustrating. And that's when God inspired another prophet to rise up and carry on the tradition of the first Isaiah. He believed God had not given up on God's people, and they shouldn't give up on God. Instead of judgment, this prophet's messages often brought comfort and encouragement. He saw these people acting as if there was no hope to be found, so he did what he could to spark their memory of who God is. I can just picture him gathering a crowd one day down by the river or by the canal. Most of the Jews, by the way, in exile lived in sort of their own communities. They were actually not prisoners. They just weren't allowed to go back to Jerusalem. They lived in their own communities. They had their own businesses. They married and gave in marriage and made money or lost money. Many of them were quite wealthy. They had servants, but they couldn't go back home. And one day I can see this prophet gathering a group. I think it's evening because I think the stars were out. And he says to them, "Look, you people, have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood what it is from the foundations of the earth? It is He who sits above the circle of the earth. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught and makes the rulers of the earth as nothing. Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown." That includes, by the way, the rulers of Babylon. He wanted to remind the people of that. "Scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth when He blows on them and they wither. The tempest carries them off like stubble. To whom then will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these, who brings out their host and numbers them, calling them all by name, because He is great in strength, mighty in power. Not one of them is missing. Why do you say, O Jacob?" That's a reference to the southern kingdom. "And complain, O Israel," a reference to the northern kingdom. "My way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord Yahweh is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. That was the first part of his message here in our text for today. Remember. When times are hard, remember who made the world. Remember who's in charge. Then he moved to the second part of his message, the encouraging part. Don't forget that there's a God who can control things. And hold on. Hold on to hope, and you'll make it. Isaiah was talking to an audience in which many people had given up on God, but he wanted them to know God had not given up on them. He believed their exile would not last forever. Their emptiness could be filled. Their grief could be comforted. Their hope could be restored. And so he went on to say, he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Now, even young people grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. They will soar. They will run. They will walk. There's your 3 gears for what it's worth. There are times in our lives when we may feel that God has granted us a heart and a vision to soar on wings like eagles, to feel power coursing through our spirit like blood pounding in our ears. Maybe that time, maybe you can remember a time like that in a meaningful service of worship, or when you had made some major decision in life or reached some longed-for accomplishment, and you felt in your bones that God was at work in you. It's good to have that feeling of soaring. But it never lasts very long, does it? 5 years ago, Susan and I were lucky enough to spend a week in Interlaken, Switzerland. It's a beautiful valley, mountains on either side, 2 amazing glacier-fed lakes, different colors, and hang gliding is a big thing. You can stand out in the valley and you can see people just twirling around up there, hang gliding. And they offered hang gliding rides where you could go up with an experienced pilot and have joined the fun. And I admired that quite a bit. But I wouldn't pay the $225 it cost to have that experience. So Susan went and bought me a ticket. From the top of a high ridge, I was strapped into a harness. And the guy behind me said, "Go." And when he did, we ran right off the edge of the mountain. And we flew. I'm telling you, it was something. Swooping around, taking selfies, flying over the valley, looking down at both of those beautiful lakes and all the people down below like ants. And we just soared. But it didn't last long. We had to come back down to earth. Susan has some awkward pictures of the landing. On rare occasions, life may feel like flying, but they don't last long. There are also times when God gives us strength to run, when we're going strong on a course that we believe is pleasing to God, when things are going well, when we're getting things done. It feels sort of like we're running, we're getting somewhere. Being with people we love can feel like that, or working at some meaningful activity, whether we get paid for it or whether it's something we do for love. It's fun to run. It used to be before I got 2 artificial hips. But we can only run so far at one time. Sooner or later, we have to slow down. And the truth is, we spend a lot of time walking, don't we? Many days, we're just plodding, plugging away at being human, slogging through the muck and the mire of what humanity has become, trying in our better moments to become what God has called us to be. Sometimes the kind of faith that soars like eagles may seem far away. The confidence to run with the pack may be a memory. Sometimes we may find it hard to believe it all, and the best we can do is to walk, to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because even when faith falters, hope endures. Look back at verse 29. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. I often like to say that faith is really hope with feet on it. Faith is hope that acts, hope that keeps on going no matter how dark it gets or how hard the way. The glad news from Isaiah is that God goes with us when we walk through the hard places, when we run on our better days, when we experience that rare but exhilarating flight. Isaiah believed and declared that God is not only the inconceivable creator of the universe, but also cares about us as individuals. So what do we do with Isaiah's encouraging message? Well, the first thing we do is remember that message of keep going, but also to remember that when God leads us to fly or to run or to walk, it's in a particular direction. It's not just to walk in any way we want to go, but to walk in God's way. As Christians, we think of following Jesus, going in Jesus' way. Israel ended up in exile because they went whatever way they wanted to go. Sometimes we need to be steered back in the right direction. Sometimes we need to be steered back in the right direction. I bought a new Prius automobile recently. And it's fancier than the base model I wanted because I couldn't find a base model. And so it has some bells and whistles I was not accustomed to. But I bet some of you have cars that have some of these features. When I'm driving along, if I get too close to the center or the edge of the road, that thing will put me back in the middle. It will turn the wheel by itself. And if I put it on cruise control, it'll almost drive itself. It'll put on the brakes. It'll speed up. It keeps me in the center. I sort of like that. Sometimes I need that. If we pay attention, we're aware that we often have a tendency to wander off course in our spiritual lives. And God won't just come push us back, but if we are open to it, we'll find there is a holy nudge that reminds us to get back on track, to remember that we are not our own, that God and our loved ones and the world all around us need us to do our part, to treat everyone with respect and to work for justice and to love others as Jesus loved us. We may need to get back on the road that leads to our true home. Somewhere more than 20 years ago, I visited the country of Honduras with Baptist men, not long after Hurricane Mitch blew through and left hundreds of people dead and much of the countryside in a shambles. Some of you may have gone on one of those trips. And as we drove on these ruined roads from place to place, I discovered that just about everywhere we went in Honduras, except maybe in the middle of the city, there were cows, and horses, livestock just sort of wandering around without a fence. They particularly seemed to like the edge of the highway where the grass was growing high. And I asked a local man who was translating for us, how could people keep up with whose cattle were whose? He just laughed and said something in Spanish that turned out to say, well, the cows and the horses know who they belong to. I find it interesting that back in Isaiah chapter 1, the first Isaiah, told Israel they should know where their spiritual home was. And he did so by saying, the ox knows its master, and the donkey its owner's manger. But Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Now here's the truth. Not one of us are Israelites. We don't live under the same covenant with God that the people of Israel did. God has not promised to always bless us when we are faithful or bring trouble on us when we're not. But through Jesus, we know we have an opportunity to enter a relationship with God through a new covenant, a covenant based on faith and trust in the saving work that Christ has already accomplished. We also know that we're not to come to Christ like someone buying fire insurance, walking the aisle just so we can get a ticket to heaven and avoid hell. We come to Christ because we believe He is the way and the truth and the life, and that following His way makes us more meaningful in our living and makes our world a better place. Believing that following Jesus is the right way. You know, when the early church first emerged, it wasn't called a church. Early on, the people weren't called Christians. They were called followers of the way. When fiery Saul went in search of Jewish believers to persecute, according to Acts 9:2, he sent letters to ask if there were any who belonged to the way in Damascus. When Luke spoke of Apollos in Acts 18, he said he had been instructed in the way of the Lord. When Paul was in Ephesus, he spoke in the synagogue until some rejected his message and spoke evil of the way. Later in Ephesus, the silversmiths who made images of Diana started a riot, the text says. And no little disturbance broke out concerning the way. When Paul was brought before Felix, he defended the way, which they call a sect. And the text even notes that Felix was rather well informed about the way. Those of us who follow Jesus are all on a journey of faith. We are all on the way. And as we go, I believe this promise does still hold, that those who hope in the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. This is our calling. This is our hope. This is our assurance. As God may be speaking to our hearts this morning, let us not fail to respond, whether it's through an inner commitment to hope in God for strength along the way. This is your time.
See how he rides through the city gates as a king with his head held high.
Today's words of response are written by poet Joy Harjo who is a member of the Muskogee Nation and served as U.S. Poet Laureate from 2019 through 2022. Eagle poem. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky, in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe, knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion, like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Please join in singing the hymn of commitment, How Lovely God, How Lovely, and it's the one found on your insert.
Hope to see you again tomorrow night, 5 o'clock in our chapel as the study continues. May we pray. God, as we go from this place, make us to soar on wings like eagles, to run and not grow weary, and to walk alongside you, knowing that you are there with us wherever we go and whomever we encounter. Amen.